Is there a way to add that to you, Katie?
You probably have to go into the Cornell Zoom online into the actual meeting editing tools, but that's okay. No worries. I'll just do some chat box introduction things. Easy adapt.
Should be co-host.
Yep, I'm definitely a co-host. It's just not giving me any poll tools. I don't know if you have to do it in like the online portal, maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you got it. I'm just learning polls right now, and I was looking at the tutorials. I'm about 90% sure that you have to set things up in the online environment, and then you can, the app allows you to deploy it, but you have to, like the profile stuff too. Early on, you had to do all that stuff online.
Does Potsdam use Zoom as their main platform?
Yes, for our distance learning, yes.
Yeah.
I tried Teams for a short time, and Teams is great for the Weiser Center stuff and just little video chats here and there, but it's just horrible for more than like 4 people, and even up to 4 people. Just terrible. But the rest of the team,
I'll have to. It won't let me change it now because we're in the meeting. But
you'd have to quit.
For the next one, we'll swap it.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds good.
People are used to the chat anyway.
Yes.
So you see,
I think the best. It's raining, so I don't know how far you want to go out. Nice. It's amazing. How much one of these run?
what did you say? $100 for the gimbal?
Oh yeah, 100. Yeah, it's even down to like $75 lately. It's pretty cheap.
I think there are a couple of these here on campus that we can actually borrow from a place, but if I do get this Alcoa grant, I may get one because we want to start doing more of this stuff, even though hopefully we'll go back face to face. It'd be nice to be able to still do virtual stuff for people who can't make it.
Yeah, you bet.
That way?
I don't know. I think maybe right through here would be all right, unless you have a different vision. Or you want to see the greenhouse that way? Is that
So you're going to be facing out, and I'll be facing. Let me mute myself.
All right, Jeremiah, I'm gonna let people in. Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Hi. Hello.
We're going to give everyone just a moment to get connected. Get audio on. We'd love to see your faces if you don't mind.
I have a quick question. I'm not sure if you signed up for 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock. Does it matter?
A little bit. What's your last name?
Lore. I'm pretty sure I'm signed up for the 4 o'clock, but I didn't want to miss it.
Okay. let me just quickly check. Yes, we do have you signed up for 4 to 6.
Okay, and it's the same link, but
Same
you have
link.
4. Okay,
Yep.
I'll see you then. Bye, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, we'll give everyone a chance to get their audio. If you don't mind muting, we would appreciate that. If you want to share your video, that would be excellent. All right. Wonderful. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Carpenter. I'm the State Director of New York Agriculture in the Classroom. We are an outreach program of Cornell University, and our job is to help teachers use food and agriculture as a lens for learning. Hopefully giving your students really neat, authentic learning experiences through agriculture and food, things that they'll enjoy participating in, build inquiry, and we want to help you meet your next generation science standards, your Common Core learning standards, all through using food and agriculture. So if you are here in this session with us, we know that you're already thinking in that mindset and you want to get your students engaged in touching their education. One of our favorite tools that we love to use are tower gardens. So I just want to do a quick getting to know you a little bit. And in the chat box, would you mind putting if you already have a tower garden that you're using? Put yes if you have one and no if you don't. Oh, we have quite a mix. All right, awesome. Yeah, a little bit of no, not using this year because of COVID. Can't wait. Awesome. Now let's do another little poll if you don't mind in the chat box. I want to hear a little bit more about you. Just pop in what grade level do you teach and what subjects do you teach also? Grade level and subjects. We definitely have a strong mix in this group, everything from elementary to high school. And hopefully we know that you teachers are the masters at manipulating, changing, and making things work for your classrooms. And luckily Tower Gardens have been successful in all these different grade levels and subject areas. We hope that this lesson today is going to be really helpful in getting your students to understand aeroponics, touching aeroponics. And if you don't have a tower already, we're excited to show you how you can earn a tower garden. So all really exciting opportunities and it along with our grant that we have available right now. So there's a lot of wonderful things going to happen today. Thank you everyone for answering those questions. Hopefully you'll get to see who else is with you today. We have some exciting plans for your virtual experience. We hope to keep you moving, keep you touching the materials that you receive from us. Hopefully everyone got their packages. You should have received 2 boxes and you have a variety of tools in there and you're actually going to touch and use some of those today. So today in our session, we're going to do a couple things. You're going to get to meet our professor at SUNY Potsdam, Ray Bowdish, and he's going to be able to introduce you to the work that he's doing in his greenhouse at SUNY Potsdam. You're also going to get to meet our educator, Jeremiah Best. He works with our New York Agriculture in the Classroom program. He's going to be facilitating your experience today. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll get a good understanding about tower gardens like the ones behind me, the tall white tubes and how that system works, but also you'll have a chance to build your own aeroponic system with your students in those 5-gallon buckets that we've provided, and how you can really build this experience and the learning opportunities about aeroponics and tower gardens in multiple ways in your classroom. So you'll learn about everything from integrated pest management and biological controls, measuring pH, adding the right amount of nutrient solution, and also those curricular connections that pair with aeroponics. These are moving sessions and working sessions, so you will get a chance to talk with the other teachers who are on this call from all across New York State. And you'll also get a chance to ask questions to our educators today. Before we start, what questions do you have? This is definitely a working and learning session. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And I am really excited to introduce you to Jeremiah and Ray as they really lead us on our first part of our experience today, which is going to be a virtual field trip for you to Potsdam State. And we'll let Jeremiah turn his video on and audio. There we go. I think you're muted, Jeremiah, but we're ready to go.
Do you have me now?
Yes.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome from Potsdam State. I have to say, coming from the Adirondacks, it's beautiful. We have some lilacs just over to my right. And we're here at the Weiser Center with Professor Bodish. So Professor Bodish, how are you?
I'm well, and yourself?
Doing well. So please tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here and what you do here at Potsdam State.
Sure, these are, this is one side of our Weiser Center greenhouses. There are 2 greenhouses that comprise about 3,000 square foot of growing space. We also have a small greenhouse over here that's our biodiversity house, where we house animals and plants and a variety of organisms.
Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Jeremiah, could you get a little bit closer? We're not able to hear very well.
Yeah. I'll try again. Let's
Much
step
better.
inside. I think you'll be able to hear me better in here. How's that?
Much better. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, it was raining out there, so I think we were getting a little extra noise. So yeah, welcome to the Weiser Center. This is greenhouse 2 actually that we came in. It's part of the 2 greenhouses that comprise 3,000 square feet of growing space. And in this particular house, most of our student projects, classroom projects, hands-on activities for outreach groups all sort of happen in this greenhouse. You see there are a bunch of tables here that have pictures on them. We've got common devices you see in the greenhouse like sprayers. The students are actively involved in doing analyses of things like the soil from outside. So we do studies where we will find soil and have them in different stratified layers. We'll kind of look at the different layers of soil that we have, from the sort of sandy layers at the bottom to the very clay layers at the top. We have on campus, we have a beehive set up. So this is some of the equipment from that. And we've harvested honey this year. Last fall, my sustainable ag course harvested honey. The end of the year, we have a couple of interns in the greenhouse right now. Over there is Callie, and over here is Laura. And the interns at the Weiser Center are usually anywhere from 1 to 6 credits. They get credit for coming in, working in the greenhouse, learning about different aspects of our programs and programming. They do everything that you see. They clean the greenhouses. They do the transplanting, cleaning of plants. They learn about integrated pest management and how to control pests, how to identify diseases and pests. Here we have one of the automatic listing tables where they started a whole bunch of different plants. These are wildflower pollinator plants that will go out to a pollinator garden later this spring. Some students have started their own tomatoes, and I encourage them to start things and use the greenhouse to start their own gardens at home. Let's see what else we have in here. Oh yes, over on the tables across the way here, we have a plethora of plants that are popular with students, but you can't really kill them. The most important one is probably aloe, right here. We sell a lot of aloe through the garden clubs, and succulents are wildly popular as well. So student clubs and our interns will propagate these succulents and then grow them and sell them to the campus community. And it's been wildly successful. For instance, the biology club used to do bake sales, and their total was $35 that they made in a bake sale. And I think the last time that they did a plant sale, they made something like $475 in a plant sale. And they basically ran out of plants. So students love doing it. We love doing that with them. So that's really what happens in this particular greenhouse. Let's move over to greenhouse 1. There's lots of stuff happening pretty much everywhere you look.
And as we're transitioning, Katie, if we have any questions from any of our participants, please feel free to throw them in chat.
So we've done some unique things here. For instance, this is a student project. They put together a fertilizer injector on an old library cart. And it was a great experiment for a while, but went outside and broke, so we had to reform it. And it works quite well now. But it teaches the students all the basic pieces that you'd have in a modern horticultural setting. We've got automatic watering systems, like over here. We've got setups where they can choose between misting options and irrigation options, depending on where the switch is set. These automatic valves open up, and then out of the sprayers here, intermittently, we get water coming out. Yep, there you go. Those sprayers push water all over the table. So we get to teach not only how these sprayers work, students assemble these irrigation systems, and they learn all the controls to control the things in the greenhouse. So if you look up above your head, we have things like curtains, which are not easy to point out, but they're all folded up right now. They're kind of silvery, and the brighter patches are the open portions of the greenhouse. So those heat and shade curtains are there. We have fans, horizontal airflow fans, a variety of vents and heaters, cooling pads, etc. So the students learn how all these things work and why they work. And then we actually turn control over to them at the end of the semester. So they have to control the greenhouse environment. So I haven't really talked about what the Weiser Center is. It was a donation from the Wagner family. So it's the Wagner Institute for Sustainability and Ecological Research. We're currently in Greenhouse 1. And Greenhouse 1 doesn't normally look like this. Actually, the floor space is used for yoga in the greenhouse at times, along with our grow towers that we'll talk about in a minute. But right now you see all of these indoor plants. And they're all here because we went around campus during the pandemic, so rounded them up and brought them all here because it was just myself taking care of all the plants on campus. And I couldn't do it if they were distributed everywhere. So I brought them all in here. We've had some that have taken right off, like this mandevilla over here in the corner. You can see it's growing up viney structures here. And that's been growing for 4 or 5 years in the greenhouse now. And we'll take that plant and we'll cut it back and we'll make cuttings, and that'll be part of our plant sale as well. We teach integrated pest management. So in the greenhouses, we hang these yellow sticky cards. And the sticky cards will get insects on them, these little dots that you see here and there. And the students will have to use magnifying lenses to try to see these dots here that I'm pointing out. Those are all insects. All right. So by identifying the insect pests, then they can decide what biological control strategy that they're going to use. But I think most people are here today to look at tower gardens. So
And Ray or Jeremiah, we do have a question before we get into tower gardens. Sean wants to know, are the sprayers just water, or do they supply water and nutrient solution?
That's a great question. Sprayers can provide either fertilized or water injection, ostensibly. The system's designed to do that. We are still waiting for some funding to put that final piece in place. We have all of the materials, but yes, we can inject fertilizer or just have regular water come through the misters. We use water because later on we use that hose for the fertilizer injector, and we individually fertilize that way. The problem with using the misters and the fertilizer together is if you don't have complete coverage on the table, that extra water with fertilizer is lost, so it's wasteful. Does that answer your question?
That's great. Thank you, Ray.
Okay.
So before we start talking about the tower garden, does anybody have any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself. We'll take a pause here for a minute. Now, you mentioned a few times doing a plant sale for fundraiser. So a lot of our schools are looking for fundraiser opportunities. Can you just briefly talk about the success? How do you go about possibly, you mentioned cuttings, putting that together and engaging your students? How do you carry that out?
Yeah, so we were lucky enough that because we worked with the local community, people brought us samples of succulents. Also, when folks would move out of their offices on campus, we bring those plants in. So we have something called the Healthy Plant Initiative, where we'll go out with interns into people's offices and spaces on campus that have plants. If they have problems with them, we counsel them through that, help them to grow the plants better. In some cases, we bring them back here and actually restore them to health, right? And in that process, we do an old greenhouse trick, which is we steal a little cutting, we snip a little cutting off the plant. And usually we have to prune a plant anyway when we're restoring it. So we'll use those and we'll plant those cuttings. And we do that for two reasons. One, it could be used for a plant sale, quite honestly. But the other one is more important, and that is if the mother plant for some reason is dying and at the end of life, we can then offer what we like to call a baby Groot. If you're familiar with any of the Marvel comics, a little starter plant back if their mother plant died. But that process got us into using succulents like jade and aloe and so forth. And we were taking cuttings from those and propagating them. And we realized that it was very easy to propagate these. So if you have the greenhouse space, or not even, especially with a lot of these indoor houseplants, you could have students maybe bring in plants or people donate cuttings back to your classrooms, and then you could start those cuttings in your classrooms pretty easily, grow them throughout the year, and then sell the little plants in the spring. So you could make it a term-long or a year-long project. The succulents aren't super fast growers, so they usually do start them in fall and sell them in spring. But what's great is that we end up having a bunch of different pot sizes and varieties, and there's all kinds of lessons in there for mathematics and business and economics that you can build into the activity, real life lessons. So the students love it here. And we, because we're a nonprofit, we can't get any of that money back, but luckily the clubs that use our services understand that it's expected that 20% of their sales go back to the Weiser Center in the form of a donation to foundation. And then we can buy more supplies for soil, pots, whatever, and for the next plant sale. So it's been a wonderful, project, I guess, or initiative that the students started, and we've been able to continue.
And as we go to the tower garden, we did have one more question. Do you collect rainwater to use?
So in the original design, this is meant to collect rainwater. When the budgets got done for the building, they cut that out at the last minute. So it's ready for that, but the gutter connected greenhouse like we're in right now is actually designed for that kind of reclamation. And as soon as we can get to that point, and we have another round of funding coming from our donor, and we're going to develop a few things like outdoor gardens. That's going to be part of the project to make a cistern underground that will allow us to save all that water and then use it again. Because it's much better than the water we're getting from Potsdam's water treatment plant. We actually have to treat that water or use a filter system and water our plants that way.
Can you share with us, so behind you we have the grow towers. Can you talk to us a little bit about the system and how these work?
Sure, absolutely. This one's in pieces. Again, this is all sort of like from the pandemic. We had 3 or 4 towers growing, and I'm taking one apart now. This is called a can right here, this bit. So these cans sit on top of a base, and inside of the base, we've got a pump that you can see down here. The pump comes out through a tube. The tube connects here. Okay, so once I've spun that in, do it now, then I can take the base down.
So there's definitely some engineering principles involved.
Oh, absolutely. So that is a submersible pump, like a fountain pump. And it's pumping up through these holes in the can, the center tube in the can. All right. And so these two fit together. And as the cans stack up, they eventually, in this case, they go 13 high. But eventually, in the mini display, the last piece is the top. We call it the shower cap. And the shower cap fits right here. So as the water bubbles up and out of the top, it splashes. I think I have it right. No, I have it upside down on it. I have it right. There we go. Sorry. It's been a while. There we go. So that fits in. The shower cap comes up and we put a top on it. So water pushes out of here. Water hits this. And then it falls down through the cans. Now back to the inside of the can, you can see where the baskets fit right here. So I'll give you an example of the basket. I'll grab one from over here. We reuse our baskets and our rock wool a lot. This is a rock wool that's been used at least once. And we'll sterilize it using a chemical called xylitol. And just imagine there's a plant in there. Well, there was a plant. It's quite dead now. It slides into the basket. And then the baskets fit into the tower like so. Now you might notice that the basket here is broken. We've been using these for about 3 years. And it doesn't matter if it breaks. This is one of the things I love about working with the Tower Gardens. So often students are very anxious about doing something wrong. They're not used to applied learning. They're not used to having their hands in on things. And so if things become difficult or if they break them, they get very, very upset. Even college students get extremely upset about it. And I tell them that, you know, failing and making mistakes is all part of learning. And for our purposes, this doesn't need to be whole. It simply needs to hold the rock wool in place. So as the water cascades down through these cans, we can imagine with this example, water splashing down through the sieve from level to level to level. It goes all the way to the top, comes all the way down, and it just keeps recycling. Any questions?
We do have a question. Katie, can you relay that question for me?
I can, yeah, and I was just typing back to Jennifer. So Jennifer was mentioning that she, excuse me, purchased some rock wool that doesn't have a hole in it. And so she was wondering if she can use it. And I was just writing to her saying, yes, you can definitely still use that. But do you want to elaborate, Ray?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question, by the way. I actually have the perfect size pinky. So if you get rock wool, if you get a dowel, all you need to do is press down in the rock wool and you can make a hole. Now I faked that one. There was a hole in this one. But as long as you can press down it, or you could even take and cut out a little piece of it if you wanted to make a well. But in point of fact, I don't see why you couldn't make a small depression with your thumb, put seeds on the top, sprinkle a little vermiculite if they need to be covered. Not all seeds need to be covered. And they'll grow just fine. I don't know, Katie, do you have any experience with growing them flat on top of the rock wool? I don't see why it wouldn't work.
Yeah, I've had no problem with that. Schools don't have any problems. And I think just the exploration of the rock wool for your students is a very sensory experience. I kind of joke, I say, let your students touch and squeeze, but when we get ready to plant, I say it's kind of like, please don't squeeze the Charmin, because if they do have a couple pieces that they can take apart and touch, they'll see that it doesn't bounce back. It's not a sponge. So that exploration of rock wool, I think, is just a neat lesson inside of Tower Garden use in itself.
Can you describe to us what rock wool is?
Oh, sure. So rock wool is actually a mined product it isn't that much different from fiberglass. So they get this, it's a mineral type product and it's extruded. It's heated up and pushed through and made into, it's very much like a fiberglass. And originally, you know, my students who are very focused on sustainability, they didn't like the rock wool because of the energy needed to produce it. So I said, well, you know, why not just reuse it if we can? And so we've gotten 3 and 4 cycles out of the rock wool. It starts to break down after a while, but then we just grind it up because it is a mineral, you know, a rock product, and then put it back into our compost heaps, and it disappears. So it just becomes part of the soil matter. And you know, it's an inert material that allows the roots to grow right through it. But it doesn't really provide any nutrition. We have to do that for them.
Another great thing to do also as you explore rock wool and growing mediums to be your seed holders is to allow your students to do some exploration. Use cotton balls, use other materials that they think of, even like those little pebbles that you would put, you know, those marble pebbles, and put some seeds in there and see what happens. So there's a lot of great exploration your students can do.
So another thing that we have here, the lighting system. These are LED lights. It's a little hard to see, but right at the very top, there's a timer. And so what we've learned is it's really a good idea to set the timers before we put the lights up there. Otherwise, we have to use this stairway, actually, that Jeremiah is using right now. But there's your timer. And the little tabs tell you whether or not the light is on or off, whether they're in or out. There you go. And these LED lights then supplement light, especially in the winter when we don't have a full 12-hour day. But while we're talking about lights, I want to caution everyone, more is not better. Plants need rest, and this is a great lesson for your students because we all need rest, including plants. The young student might think, well, if photosynthesis is working when light hits the plant leaf, then we would want more photosynthesis because we make more sugar and so we can grow more plant. It's a great lesson to teach you about the light-dark cycles of the plant, and that sugar is created when the dark cycle happens. The precursors of that sugar are made during the light session, and it's overnight that respiration has to happen and make those sugars for the plant. So we do experiments sometimes where we'll have continuous light on plants, and those without, and the students will ask, why are they dying if they're under the light? And we explain the light-dark cycles and so forth. So it's a great little lesson that you can have. And you can set tower gardens up that way too. Put more light and less light and have them, you know, create a hypothesis for what they think is going to happen. It's not unlike the seed. A lot of students, if you tell them you're going to put seeds in the dark, they'll think that the seeds won't grow at all. But a week later, they'll find these long white strands that have come out of the seed that haven't seen any light, that are plant tissue, and it shows them how much energy is actually in the seed. They don't need any light at all. So it's similar to that sort of lesson, showing them the hidden things that are happening inside plant life. So I'm thinking it's getting loud in here. It might be tough for us to continue this, but we could go up into the Weiser Center.
Yep.
I don't know what we're like to time right now. So one of the great things about the Weiser Center is it's a gift to the biology department at SUNY Potsdam, but it's the idea is for the campus through biology, the campus to reach out to the local community and to the rest of the globe. And so we've had local volunteers who've actually created the signs like you see here. These benches out of local woods, including all live edge here. So a lot of our furniture installations are made from what we call throwaway wood, but they end up being beautiful pieces of art And they were donated from local folks that believe that sustainability is really important. So we call this our link area, and I think there's an important piece over here. We have a little mobile station that we use. There's a microscope on the back. I'll put, I don't have it right now, but I'll put my laptop here. We've got the my favorite toy, the EnviroSpecs here. The basically you can zoom in. They're quite fun for the students to use. OptiVisor, that's the brand name of them. I call them MagnaSpecs. But what we'll do is we'll use this microscope, and we can remove the ocular here and use a microscope camera in place. I don't have one here right now, but it just inserts in there. I can send a link through Egg in the Classroom to everyone on how to get these. They're very inexpensive dyno-like cameras. And so that's how students are able then to project images onto screens so we can all observe things at the same time. It's much more powerful if you can take a small group of students and show them exactly the same. It's a shared experience moment where they can all sort of see the same thing at the same time. It's problematic with microscopes, as you probably know, in the science classrooms, to show one kid and then try to show another kid. Even if you have the two-person scopes with two sets of oculars, it's very difficult to point things out under the scope about what you're talking about. So I really encourage either the standalone scopes from DynoEye and or something like this, where you have an old scope that's still kicking around your department, and you buy a DynoEye camera and you put a laptop with it and you put them all together. So it's a great idea. So one of the things I was talking about before, jumping to that's the light system. This is an add-on light. So if you have an old scope like this, so this predates me. This was a 1963 scope. So I wasn't born yet. So we have an LED add-on that we buy. It slides on here and then screws together, and it holds on to the scope so that we can provide the kind of light that we need to see these small insects. All right. So the lighting is very key. And usually the DynoEye scopes have their own lighting with them, so they're all in one. They're about, I want to say they're $175 or $200 now, which is not cheap, but with a small grant, you could easily buy one. But one of the things I was talking about before was the control of all of the environmental systems in the greenhouse. So we have the students run all of the different controllers. This is a mist timer down here. And so it can mist every hour. Up here is the Rain Pro, which is it's a more of a calendar-based irrigation system. And what it does, it allows us to set up any day and time, and within minutes, water our crops at 15 different stations automatically. We have a map that the students created so we can find out what misters are where and what irrigation stations are where. And that was kind of fun to make. But if you come back here and take a look at this whole wall, the higher ups, the administrators wanted to bury all this behind a wall because they thought it kind of looked ugly. I'm a farmer also, so this to me is like a work of art. This is hard to do, and really talented electricians had to come in here and piece all this together. So I hate hiding good work. But more importantly, I think it's important for students not to be afraid of things that were made for humans to control. So we bring them into the EnviroStep controller. They learn to use all of the various systems here that I'm turning back on since we're not in the greenhouse. They learned about the electronic controllers, etc. So we want them to understand how these systems work. So for instance, we have relays down here that Jeremiah is showing you right now. And I can explain to them about electricity and why we have a relay and the difference between a 24 volt system and a and a 110-volt system. So we can talk about a lot of different scientific, or I should say, science-based content here, but with a practical application. Moreover, these can all be traced back to the greenhouse. Each one of these conduits ends up going into the greenhouse, and so we have the story of where does your poop go when you flush it, more or less. The same idea with electrons. Where do those electrons go when we enact the switch? So we can follow it physically through the greenhouse and see it come down into the switch. So it goes up in there, but when it enters the greenhouse, you can see all the pipes come out in the same order they went in. Up there, it's up there in the fig tree. See that, Jeremiah? So there all the conduits come in. So that's the link area. It's a good teaching space. And then we'll go up to the classroom space. I think we're coming up on the workshop time, aren't we?
We are, Ray. So we probably have time just for one more point. And I was hoping you'd be able to talk about your connection with the food service and how you have supplied food service and your relationship with your food service directors and at Potsdam State.
Perfect. So yes, you're in the classroom portion of the Weiser Center, and Jeremiah is showing you around. And we were able to get a tower together for you over here. He's showing you some of that live edge wood that we use for actual teaching tools in here. But to answer your point, Katie, we use towers down there to grow plants like these that go in our local dining services bistro called Dexter's. So that's a catering service and an indoor eatery. Well, before COVID, it was an indoor eatery. And my students here wanted to grow one, so they started their own, and they've got cucumbers on the bottom. They've got cilantro in here. They've got arugula. They've got lettuce. And they've got some insect problems. We could talk about that later after the workshop. But what we do is the students grow this food, they harvest it, they bring it to the kitchen weighs it, records the weight, and then uses it in their meals. And they advertise us just like a farm to fork style restaurant. So when you go for a salad, it will say, you know, arugula and mushroom with pecan salad made with Weiser greens. So the students really get a kick out of that. They, you know, when they know that they're the campus urban farmer, they're really excited about being part of this, you know, business, so to speak, and that their own hands brought to the table the greens that they grew. So right from seed to final harvest, and then they eat their own greens. It's fulfilling. Sorry, that was a bad pun, but they do enjoy it, and we get great feedback.
Well, Ray, we are so grateful that you were willing to show us around your greenhouse, talk about some of the systems and opportunities you've put in place for your students at Potsdam. I think you really give them a robust experience, and even in a North Country college, you're really giving them a really neat urban agriculture growing experience. And I think that's really unique about what you do, and you're the perfect person to do it. So we are so appreciative of you showing us around your space and your home. We do have a question before we transition out. I just don't want to miss people's questions. So two things, and if we can do them quickly, if not, we'll stay with Ray. Ray's going to come back and do a technical component with us. And so we have a question about the growth rate in aeroponics compared to soil.
So right here, basically, we're looking at, you can make the same growth rate with hydroponics as you can with soil. It's all about temperature and nutrients. So if anyone's telling you that they can do it faster in hydroponics, it's not completely true. And if you're looking at growing things really fast, often you don't get the same kind of quality. So we actually cool down our greenhouses, but our cycles are about 22 days for most of our lettuces and things like that till harvest.
Excellent. We have a comment that we have a Potsdam alum, and they are so proud. She thinks this is great. So a comment there. And then we do have questions about the support structure around the tower, but maybe we can save that. We'll come back to that question and we'll dig into that a little bit more in the next piece.
Sounds like a good idea.
All right. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
So we'll give Jeremiah just a moment to transition over to lead the lesson. Thank you so much for your great questions. I see lots of awesome note taking. Don't hesitate to put those questions in chat as you think about them. But as we're transitioning, we just want to know in our transition time, if you could put in the chat box, what are some things you are already doing to talk about food and agriculture in your classroom? It's a great chance just to give some inspiration to all the people around us. I see Corinne over there, and I know one of the things she's going to talk about. So, which is great. We're just finishing up our maple contest. So we have teachers across the state who make maple syrup, and I just got Corinne's the other day, and we're finishing up that contest. Her family makes delicious maple syrup. My daughter's first maple syrup was their syrup. Sarah is talking about worm bins. They have worm bins that they are working on. Sarah was also part of our vermicomposting workshop that we did, a virtual PD. Sean has an NFT hydroponic system in his classroom, and he's been using for demonstrations. Caitlin's growing garlic. Oh, awesome. We have people growing greens and tomatoes and peppers, and it's an incentive for students. Oh, that's really interesting. Raised beds, maple. Oh yeah, Sean, I love that you are having students build their own systems. We have an ag teacher who's just awesome, and she makes it as a challenge in her classroom, giving them the tools that they need. And she says, go at it. You build your own hydroponic design. And she shared some of the videos, and they were really, really interesting. They built them from the ground up with very simple tools. Andrea is composting with worms, red wigglers. And she was part of our last training with the composting. And she has an activity called Oops, I Soiled My Undies, where you bury a pair of cotton underwear, and it shows your students how long it takes for them to decompose. Jennifer's talking about how at Salmon River they supply greens to the cafeteria. Obviously not this year, but excited to start that again. And some outdoor gardens. I saw some beautiful pictures of her students working on those. Jeremiah, you just let me know when you're ready, and we'll keep talking over here.
All right.
All right, can you talk again, Jeremiah? Oh, I see you. There you go. Oops. Sorry about that, folks. We'll just get Jeremiah queued up.
Well, good afternoon. I hope you all enjoyed the greenhouse as much as I did. Coming from Inlet, New York, in the heart of the Adirondacks, I must say it was quite refreshing to see some tropical plants green everywhere. Many other parts of the state are greening up quite quickly, but in the Adirondacks, we still have some snow in places, so it's quite a different climate. So today we're going to talk about the different types of ponics, as well as give you all a challenge that we want you to be able to introduce with your students using the kits that we have shared with you. So there are many types, and can y'all see my slideshow?
Yes,
Awesome.
we can see it. If you could just talk a little bit louder, Jeremiah, that would be great. Audio's a little low.
So there are many types of different types of ponics when we start talking about ponics. In chat, is anybody familiar with the different types of ponics? You can throw that response in chat. So today we do have aero, aqua, hydro, awesome, and we're going to quickly go over those. So let me start by just defining what aeroponics is. So when we talk about ponics, those are different ways of growing. Classically, we know the geoponics, and geoponics is just growing in soil. So that's your traditional agriculture, talking about your school gardens. So hydroponics is where you're growing in nutrient rich water. So when we're talking about growing in soil, we're adding fertilizers and amendments to the soil. When we're talking about growing in things other than soil, we're adding those nutrients and minerals to water. So here in hydroponics, you can see that the root system is growing directly in water. And what happens is they float. So this would be a piece of styrofoam. And they would just float this on top of a big bed of water. Nutrients would be added and circulated through the system to make sure that things don't become stagnant. And those root systems develop just in the pool of water. So the next is aquaponics. So aquaponics is when you start to add aquatic life. Aquaculture is a term that's very popular right now. There's a lot of movements to aquaculture where people are growing offshore in offshore farms, but they're also growing in the center of the state where there's very little water or bodies of water. And so what they do is that they have a large container, just much like the hydroponics, that contains sea life. Tilapia is a very popular fish. And so what happens is as the tilapia or the aquatic life releases and has bio inputs into the system, you're talking about ecosystems and how things interrelate with each other. They add their excrement and ammonia into the water. That water is pumped up through and drip irrigated into the plants. The plants pull that ammonia and start to transfer that into nitrogen for the plant to use through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria on the root system. And then any of the plant life and plant matter that's not used is put back into the water that then the aquatic life can eat. In essence, your green products are acting as your filter. And your aquatic life is acting as your fertilizer and nutrient source. And today we're talking about aquaponics or aeroponics. Aeroponics is just growing, as you saw in the tower garden. As you'll build out with your kids, you're just growing in a nutrient-rich mist. So what you're doing is you're introducing those nutrients that are needed by plants and animals, and you are then misting that in a chamber, and those root systems are developing and picking up those nutrients from that mist. Does anybody have any questions before we move forward? So just a quick review, you have geoponics, which is traditional growing. You have hydroponics, which is growing in water. You have aquaponics, which is growing with aquatic life, and you have aeroponics, which are growing with a mist. So just in chat, what do living things need to grow and survive? We love to throw this out at the beginning of these lessons to our students because we have a conceptual understanding or thought of what's needed. So if you could just throw in chat and list some of the things that not just plants, but animals need to survive. So I have air, sun, water, nutrients, light, water, space, nutrients, environment, water, nutrients, CO2. Excellent. One of the ways that acronym that we can think about in memorizing the needs of plants and animals is lawn. So one of the things that we need is light. One of the questions that our students will ask it, or you might hear them respond to sun, and we do not need sun to grow plants. Now, is it beneficial? Yes. Is it free of cost? Yes, it is. So Sun is very beneficial, but we do need a light source: air, water, nutrients. So that's our 4 basic needs, and it spells long: light, air, water, nutrients. We also need space to grow, just like plants. If we are all compartmentalized in one room, we would be pretty miserable, and we probably would have some development issues because we would be crowding each other out. And then, of course, as Ray mentioned, we do need temperature. So temperature plays a major role when you think about that seasonal aspect. It's a great chance to pull that into the classroom when growing plants. You can start a plant inside, you can start a plant out, 2 plants inside, and put one outside and one inside during a less desirable growing seasons. And students can start to see the response of the plant, one inside to the one outside. So soil, where's the soil? Soil is important when we're talking about growing, but thinking about soil and good soil, we just had a professional development on soil. Soil is really about capacity. It holds plants, it holds water, and it holds nutrients. So all 3 of these can be answered for when we're talking about hydroponics, aeroponics, aquaponics, because we have that water solution that's in a basin, and that basin is holding that water just like soil would hold the water. That water is holding the nutrients just like the soil would hold the nutrients. One of the things that we are missing is in healthy soils, we do have that bacteria growth. And sometimes in these systems, there are questions about how does that affect that finished product, a product grown in soil compared to a product that's sold or grown aeroponically or hydroponically. So we want to give you a phenomena, and we're going to put you in groups. And before we move into the phenomena, does anybody have any questions? So our phenomena is that according to projections, we're going to have our population is going to explode by 2050. Will be over 10.5 billion humans. So as we're challenging our students to think about this phenomena-based experience, we want to ask them, how do we grow food? How do we sustain the food and fiber needs of 10.5 million people? So what are some of the issues as a planet that we want to face? You can put that in chat. That we will face when we see as populations start to continue to grow. So we have loss of habitat, shortage of water. Agriculture uses about 80% of the fresh water that we have in our country. So that's very important. We're going to have less acreage. So the challenge is having our students now to start to engineer and identify how can we solve these solutions? How can we create a solution to grow more on less acreage? And this is the challenge you want to put out to you. So we are going to put you in groups of 5. And you are going to be challenged. If you want to grab your buckets that or your kits that were sent to you, you can take a look at those supplies. Those are going to be the supplies that you're going to have to engineer a solution to the phenomena, the growing population. So you're going to use the supplies that you were sent. And as a group, we are challenging you to create at least 2 solutions and think through those 2 solutions and choose one of the solutions as a group that you think is best. So this is your goals. You'll have 10 minutes to work with groups and you will solve steps 1, 3, and 4. I will share that link with you in chat. And as you participate in this lesson, this is in our lesson matrix, and Katie will talk about this. a little later. But as you're participating with this lesson, your students will have the opportunity to utilize this handout. These resources are there, as well as a PowerPoint for that introductory teaching piece. So you'll have time to create 2 conceptual solutions using the supplies. So your bucket, your pump, your rock wool, to start a small urban garden that can then possibly translate into a small urban farm. So you'll need one person who will record those solutions and share out. When we come back, we'll share out those solutions. So think about, as you're developing your solution, think about the things that plants need: light, air, water, nutrients, space, and temperature. We have given you a limited supply of items to use, and we want you to think past that, using making some inferences and using some of your knowledge that you have. What are things that you can add to meet those needs of the growing plants? So does anybody have any questions before we get started? No? All right, Katie, did you want to break them up into groups?
Yes, I'm going to break you out into groups, so you'll enter those breakout rooms. I will give you some time notes as we get move through time. I'll be your timekeeper. Jeremiah and I will cycle through rooms if you have any questions, but don't hesitate to reach out if you do.
Katie,
Yes.
this is Andrea and Sarah. When I click on that link to go to the assignment that goes, the handout, it says I have to leave Zoom. That's okay?
Yeah, that's okay. It'll just open it up in a browser. I think it's because Jeremiah is sharing his screen, so it's probably large on your screen.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, we're going to open those rooms. Jeremiah, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. We had just like 4 people in each room, so I moved some folks to make 5 rooms. You are in room 1, so I'm just going to move you into a room and then I'll close that room. Does that sound good?
Perfect.
Okay.
So we're going to give them about 8 minutes.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So I know everybody's joining us. I hope you all had a good time. I was able.
Jeremiah, before you go, we still have a bunch of people in rooms.
So as we're waiting, any thoughts of the process while people are joining us? And then we'll share out your solutions that your group made. And you can unmute yourself. How about Tanya? Any thoughts about the process? We had a good discussion in your chat room. Oh, you're muted.
I'm not very fast at finding the mute button. I have lots of thoughts. So I teach technology and engineering. So I'm like super excited because, and you confirmed my thoughts right at the end of our conversation. So this project seems to be a bit more focused on that engineering piece of the standards than I don't know the rest of it. Anyways, so I was listening to you talk to our group about it being giving the pieces to our students and allowing them to be creative with the solution and not giving the solution to our students. And we do that a lot. You know, that's how every single one of my projects go. So I'm very excited to hear that. I have ideas. I want to really dive into, I'm trying to look at systems controls. And so I was just diving into the box today and I realized that there's an Arduino in there. And so I need to spend some time, because I would love, once we get this built, to include in there some controls where it's working on its own. And we're controlling, you know, we have a system that can add the nutrients when it needs to be added, depending on the sensors that are collecting the pH or whatever, you know. This is where I need to work with my science folks too.
So awesome.
So I'm very excited.
Well, thank you. And this lesson is really broken into multiple steps. So that first step is really that engineering concept. As we're thinking K through 12, you know, we can support thinking of that zone of proximal development. You know, we can support where we need to support, but this is a great opportunity. We sent you 3 buckets. And I put in the email, we sent you 3 buckets for a reason, because 1 bucket, turn it into a potato planter. We wanted you to go to town, your students to go to town, drill, think about it, synthesize. If you go to your local Walmarts or bake shops, a lot of times you can purchase food grade buckets for like $1 a piece. So if you really wanted to get one for each of your students, to really have a prototype and develop that, there's that piece to it. As you go into that back part of the lesson, you're really focused on things like the nutrients and plant needs. So we're going into that biology, thinking of the early elementary, we're thinking about ecosystems and habitats. So it's a very broad reaching lesson. So somebody from group 1, I think Tanya, were you in group 1? Group 2, I was group 1. So group 2, did you have somebody you want to share out quickly about the solutions that you came up with? Do you have a spokesperson?
So Jeremiah, I think I was in group 2, and I'm not sure that we had any solutions at the end because we were still kind of looking at the kits.
Well, that's a
Right?
solution in itself, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Group 3, anybody from group 3 want to share out?
I cheated. I've got help. I've got 2 of my colleagues here listening in. And as you can see behind us, more or less what we came up with, because we weren't necessarily paying attention to everything that you were saying, was the poor man's bucket version of a tower garden. Since, well, you've got all the parts and pieces for it, why not? And just like the tower gardens are modular, this seems like it could be modular too. And the only thing that we would really be missing is some hose to utilize the screw and barbs that were provided with the pump. And you can put as many buckets on top of this as you wanted. You gave us a 2-inch hole saw, which conveniently is just about the right size for these. So it seems pretty obvious that if you get the right angle, you can pop those suckers right in there. And again, we're just doing the poor man's tower garden. So it's not the most original design, but it certainly is a tower garden on a budget.
So something I told 2 other groups is never cheating if you're using the resources that I left in the classroom or you left in the classroom. So we call that using your resources. So excellent job. So
That's just pulling in our light rig.
you pulled in your light. You thought about, that light need for plants and living things. You thought about, I see the nutrients and the water sources. Excellent job. So thank you so much, Group 4. Anybody want to share out?
Sure, I think we were Group 4. So we kind of just talked about the kits a little bit and like what's going on with it, but something different idea was like to throw the bucket on its side, and have your holes in your pots along on the outside, so you got space to grow out and this way and more room to get more plants on the bucket. Because it's really neat that the bucket's sealed and there's those little foam pieces to so you're not losing as much water as possible, that if you have a big open net pot. But it seems like something like this, every house should have it, and you grow it at home, and that's how you meet the needs of people. They do it themselves. You learn. You have community talking about growing in home with hydroponics, and then for harder to grow stuff, have an industrial grower and doing our tomatoes or whatever else that these things aren't good for.
I think that's a great solution, and you really took that concept of space. And I think by turning that on its side, now you've given yourself more space to grow more plants, which is a great solution for that. You can challenge your students to take that to the next step. Could you develop a rack so that you could have multiple of those on the wall? Now we can push it to the next level and say, okay, here's a prototype. I need more. And I love that you looked in the challenge and saw grow as much food as possible. And you really utilize your resources. So great job.
Yeah.
I think we're on to Group 5.
All right, I'll speak for Group 5. We actually came up with versions of things that both of the groups said of turning it on its side and doing a horizontal system instead of the vertical system, because a trough or well of water would be really easy to continue to grow plants. But then also, if we could stack the tubs on top of each other vertically, you could almost even cut a hole through the bottom and use like a silicone sealant, like for aquariums, to make it nice and watertight, and then take the cups and then put them on the sides of the bucket and then have it be stacked up that way, and then use the second pump as a catch to make sure that the water makes it all the way to the top of your system and that everything is getting the nutrients that it should to grow. So we
Awesome.
can go 2 ways.
Great solution. And do we have a 6, Katie? Do we have a Group 6? In
Yes,
Group
we-
6, thank you so much for sharing. Do you have somebody from Group 6 who would like to share out?
I believe that my group was Group 6. So we kind of came up with the same ideas as in regards to, if we're having this growing population, we really need to consider growing vertically, also growing using the minimal amount of soil. So we were kind of focusing on that. We haven't really gotten to the part where how are we going to use these buckets, but definitely the idea of using a vertical tower is what we were kind of heading to, and trying to use that vertical space using some sort of a grow light instead of the sun, because maybe we won't be out having that soil and having that type of a garden environment, that traditional garden environment. So that's what we were trying to work on. Didn't quite get to the design of the bucket because we were focusing more on what other solutions might there be instead of the bucket. So
Awesome. That's great to hear, because that's the whole part of that R&D process that we want our students to do. I have to say, I don't want anybody to rush off this Zoom, but I think it's a race to the patent office. There's some similar ideas there, so you might want to get that patent. Excellent job. Thank you for sharing. So we're going to join Professor Bodish here in our next session, and he's going to discuss some of the nutrients needs and some of what you need to think about. We did we did talk about the fact that we do need nutrients and that we're not using soil. So that water is really that nutrient holder. And because it's in a pot, it's not running off. So we have it in one area. So he's going to discuss that. Before we do that, Katie wants to share with you some of our grants as well as where you can find some of these lessons on the matrix.
Thanks, Jeremiah. So during this transition, we are going to show you just some of the tools that will be really helpful. With your kits that we sent you, there were 2 of the Aeroponic kit boxes in there. But before you really dig into that, we want to make sure that you understand our curriculum matrix. The screen that I'm sharing is our New York Agriculture in the Classroom website. After our rotating pictures, the next blue box that you see on our website is our National Curriculum Matrix. This is an online searchable database for the best lessons from across the country. Every lesson's been vetted by our team of agricultural literacy specialists, and they continue to develop lessons to help you meet your classroom learning standards, but using that context of agriculture. So it's searchable, just keyword searchable. I have aeroponics in here. So you can see there are 2 versions, a middle school and a high school version of this lesson. One is just scaled up from the other. So I'm going to click on one of these lessons. The beautiful thing about this matrix, whether you're searching for vegetables or dairy or hydroponics, aeroponics, aquaponics, whatever you are interested in, nutrient solution, soil, erosion, all, any of those keywords that you might think about, there's over 500 lessons, but every single lesson looks exactly the same. You're going to have your purpose statement, what you're going to accomplish, your time for each activity that is laid out, all the materials that you'll need, any optional activity materials. And then what I love most is that all the essential files are done for you. The PowerPoint is already developed. If it talks about a activity sheet like the one you were just working off of, it's already done for you. So it's just very comprehensive, and that's every single lesson that you see. So if you still don't feel like an expert in aeroponics or hydroponics or any of the above, I also love that there's enough background information to make you feel confident to teach this with your students, but not enough that it's overwhelming. The other great thing, this lesson that I'm showing you pairs with the kit inside of your kit that we sent you, your mailing. And there's a great video that National Ag in the Classroom has developed about building these bucket aeroponic systems. So that's for your information. So you can see how one is put together. And then it goes through each of the activities. Here you can see we have our 3-dimensional learning proficiencies for aligned to next generation learning standards, science standards. And so you can see those broken out throughout these lessons. But really, this is all about design challenges, about engineering. We talk about the engineering design process here as your students move through this. So it really is helping you facilitate the experience, not necessarily teach, which is what I know a lot of us do in our classrooms. We are facilitating those learning experiences as the students are asking questions and wanting to learn more. So here's your optional programming activity with the programming boards, the Arduino boards that Tanya had mentioned she was excited to see. And then of course the enriching activities and videos. At the bottom of every single lesson, it's kind of like Amazon. It's like, oh, you search for this, you might also like this. So these are all the suggested companion resources at the bottom. And every lesson is aligned to Common Core Learning Standards. If your administrator walks by and says, what the heck are you doing? So you can show them just where it fits in. So the other great thing about this is that along with this great lesson and all the wonderful lessons on the curriculum matrix, we also have this Ag Classroom Store. That's where your kits came from. This is our National Resource Center, so you can click and learn more about your kit. And it tells you materials included, materials to gather. We try to outfit you with all the things that you would need. But again, videos. Our friend Sarah McCardle, she was talking about the aquaponics kit that she has. So remember, if you remember from Jeremiah's lesson, that's talking about growing food with fish. So this is probably the most high priced item that we have in the store. But if you have a grant of some sort, it gives you a full kit. It gives you everything except the fish in the water, so that you can have a tub-based aquaponic system in your classroom that'll fit. You don't need a big lab. You can have this in your own classroom space. The last thing I want to show you and talk about as we move on to our time with Ray answering all of your very technical questions, is that if you're looking for a tower garden, now is the time to apply for our Grow With Us grant. We invest about $60,000 in grow towers. And so if you apply for this grant and are successful, then you would earn a bundle of 3 of these tower gardens. That would include your dolly, all your nutrient solution, your light system would all be part of this. You'd also get an extension to add a few more of those cups on. So this is available now and it is due on May 15th. So you have about 2 weeks or so to get that done, 2.5 weeks. And we would love to see your applications for that. You could be one of our many schools that receive this. It's about a $3,200 value for this grant. Before I hand it back over to Ray and Jeremiah, what questions do you have about learning connections, curricular connections? Awesome. Well, thank you for that. We appreciate you designing along with us. And I am going to let Jeremiah and Ray have a conversation about managing your tower garden.
Hello again. I was just thinking about all the different ways that we started here in the Weiser Center and having a conversation off camera here with Jeremiah, excuse me, and he was mentioning to me how I should talk about some of the ways that, starting with tower gardens has spun off into other endeavors. And when we walked in earlier, I showed you there were all kinds of things going on. But we really did start with a guy by the name of Stephen Ritz, who's down in the Bronx, and he helped us get started. We had a tower garden workshop with some educators. That's where I met Katie, actually, the first time. And but the tower gardens themselves, people ask me all this all the time, are they sustainable? And, I think that's a great question for your students. I know where I fall in on that. I think that, as a sustainability teaching appliance, this is fantastic. Is it sustainable? Well, that's remains to be seen. Yes, it uses less fossil fuels. Yes, we can grow it indoors. And yes, you have greens really close to home. But we can't deny that the technologies that go into these things require elements that have to be mined. So we have other issues of things like social sustainability, right? We have environmental sustainability and economic sustainability, the 3 pillars of sustainability. And using this as a talking piece and educational appliance allows us to talk about other things. For instance, here we have cucumbers growing. And right now, this little cucumber you can see is developing out of the flower. It's a wonderful example to students of how fruits come from flowers. But it's also an excellent way to talk about pollination and the fact that we have to do the pollinator's job here in the greenhouse. As we move from the food portion of growing food, we can talk about things like cooking food. So you can move off into the areas of culinary expertise and creating new dishes from the things that you grow, and even more importantly, planning a meal. So when you start your tower garden, I want you to think about the end product versus getting it assembled. Get the students to sit down and think about what do they want to eat? Because if you can get their investment in what they want, for instance, this was planted by the students here at SUNY Potsdam. They specifically chose these because they like to eat them. All the different plants that we see here. And a couple of them, they just wanted to see if it worked. So that's always fun. But it spun off at the Weiser Center into a whole bunch of different initiatives, including having bees on campus and beehives, a healthy plant initiative where we help people take care of their plants in their offices and in their apartments. We have another one called, an initiative called the Pet Plants Project. So we found that lot of students suffer from depression and anxiety. And so the Pet Plants Project gives them pet plants to take back and take care of. We do everything from entertaining any idea a student has. For instance, recently someone said, hey, can I bring in some soap that I've made and tell people how I make it? And I said, absolutely. Students will come in all the time into the greenhouse and say, could we do this or could we do that? And I'll say, absolutely. We can do whatever you want to do. But I put it on them to do the planning, to think about the pieces and parts. And I put it on me to help them through the mental hurdles that they may have trying to understand what the next step is or how to put things together. So this active learning that we were able to do in the Weiser Center is something that can be replicated in classrooms, and we do push out into classrooms in our local area. We bring interns in to talk to students about their grow setups and how they do it, help them solve problems. And one of the things I'm going to talk about now is, besides planting and deciding what you're going to plant and making sure you have everything set up with your grow towers, are the nutrients. I was asked earlier about the nutrients and how they're delivered through our misting systems. Well, the tower gardens, we've got nutrient blends A and B. And those three numbers that you see stand for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So 200 means that there's 2% nitrogen, 0% phosphorus, and 0% potassium. In the tower garden mineral B, you can see it's a 0 nitrogen, 1% phosphorus, and 3% potassium. So the NPK are in those three numbers. Now, one thing that you want to do here is when you're mixing your nutrients, you want to follow the directions closely and make sure that the students don't mix accidentally the two mineral A and B together. That's a chemistry lesson in itself on precipitation. If you mix mineral A and B together before they're put into the water, it creates a salt, which goes to the bottom and is not available to the plants. So my college students, the first time we did one of our tower gardens, they said, well, how do we do it? I said, you're in college, figure it out. And so they ignored the instructions, they mixed everything together, and they had a huge precipitate on the bottom of their tower garden. One of the students came up to me and said, you know, I came here to learn, and I wondered why it is that you didn't tell us that we should, read the directions, and why you didn't tell us that we have this problem. And I said, if I told you that, you'd forget when you walked out of the room. But when you make the mistake and you have to correct the mistake, you rarely forget that. So we have to get our students comfortable with making mistakes. We have to get our students comfortable with taking chances, stretching their minds, thinking outside of the box, and really trying to get them away from the anxieties and things that come along with these new experiences. So when you're putting your mineral A and B solutions together, you'll probably be using a graduated cylinder. I'm going to grab mine right here. Also my graduated cylinder. Okay, well, so I know I set it down here somewhere, but my graduated cylinder is gone. I think most of you know what they are. But you don't need to use that. You can use a measuring cup. And it's a great moment to take and get your students to realize that conversions have to happen often. Generally, if you're using a measuring cup, there are both measurements, the metric and the standard measurement on there. In my science classroom, I require that everyone use metric and only metric. If you start with an English measurement, you have to turn it over. You have to create a metric measurement out of it. So according to the directions, we're using 20 mils right here of mineral A and mineral B per gallon. So there's your nice little math problem for your students. You have 20 gallons here. They need to have 20 mils per gallon. So 400 mils of A and 400 mils of B go in separately. Now what happens is when they go into the reservoir here, I'm going to turn this around a little so you can see it. You pour them into the reservoir. And then the important part is taking the pH. pH is pretty simple to do. The first thing you want to do is scoop out some water from your tower garden, and I tell my students just to move my hand around there, get a nice sample. Don't just skim from the top. Pour it out. And what we're trying to do is get down to 5 mils. It's a great moment to remind them that when they're doing this, they want that meniscus to be right on the 5 mil line. And I'm pretty sure it is right there. Maybe Jeremiah could verify for me. Pretty close, right? So as long as we're there, then we add 5 drops of the indicator solution. Even for kids in 3rd grade, this is something that they can do. And they really enjoy doing it, especially when they see the color change. 2, 3, 4, 5 drops. And then there's a color chart. Box go, my color chart. There, we'll put that down here. Color chart over here. So I've shared a few links with Jeremiah and Katie in an email that I'm sending out after this, so you can share those with your students. So Jeremiah just did the color match, and we're looking at a nice 6.0, I would say, between 5.5 and 6.0 based on the color. This is not a good thing to do with students that are colorblind or color challenged, as we like to call it. It doesn't work well. So what you want to consider is using a different test method. There are very inexpensive pH meters out there that you can get for your class, digital pH meters. And I think those are good to have alongside the colorimetrics to show them 2 different ways of measuring it. But let's talk about the importance of pH and maybe the lack of importance in a way. We want to keep pH at 5.5 to 5.7, excuse me, between 5.5 and 6.0 in tower gardens. But if it goes down below that or up above that, it is not an immediate problem like it would be in a fish tank, where you suddenly change the pH the next, few hours later, you come in and you've got a bunch of dead fish. Here you've got some time. But the importance of pH is to create nutrient availability. Remember before I said, if you mix A and B solutions of the mineral A and B, you precipitate a salt. For all of these nutrients, NP and K, it's very important that you have a pH range that makes them soluble. So it's pretty easy to find on the internet if you Google pH, nutrient availability, and plant, those words. And you're going to find an interesting chart that shows the range where different nutrients, both macro and micronutrients, are available to plants. So the big ones like calcium, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, those all are very tightly connected to pH. If your pH shifts too high or too low, nutrient availability changes for the plant. So keeping that pH in the designated range is important, but it isn't critical if you come in on a Monday morning and realize that the pH has been down to 4.8 over the weekend or up at 7.5. You can easily recover from that kind of pH shift. The other problems that you can have on the tower gardens are insect problems. And we've got some examples here.
Ray, I'm sorry, before we move on to insects, we do have a pH question from Sean.
Yep.
Can you rely on pH meters solely to test, or would it be best to use the color test and the pH meter?
I think it's a few things. Number one, depending on the age of your student, I think colorimetrics are easy for younger students and maybe a little more fun. If you only have pH meters, that's totally fine, but I do want to caution you that you have to make sure that you're calibrating those pH meters and that you're storing them correctly. Often pH meters that we use for liquid will have a bulb in them that has to be immersed in a solution of, say, 4 pH acid all the time if it's not being used. So just be careful. You can certainly use them. I like to have the digital pH meters for the older students. So once we've got our pH tested, we have 2 solutions. One here is an acid, let's imagine our pH was a little too high, which it wasn't, but if it was, we could add acid to bring it down. Same thing here, we can add a base. If the pH is too low, we can add a base. Now you'll notice that there's a number here. Potassium, 5%. So this is a KO, I believe this is a K2O, which is a soluble potash. And what I want to tell you, educators with low budgets like me, this is very expensive. But it is not hard to mix your own solutions and buy a standard jar of potash, chemical grade potash. It'll last you years and years and years. You can mix it to the appropriate 5%, right? So it's a nice little chemistry lesson. You can do a mass volume dilution. Remember, for 5%, you're going to put 5 grams into 100 milliliters for a 5% solution, okay? Just as a reminder. And so you can use your own acids and your own bases by reading the ingredients here. The acid that they use is a phosphorus. So again, you see the middle number is 3%. And it's a phosphate. So this is P2O5, right? So that's the phosphate. And that raises that lowers the pH. Now, by using an acid that has the same chemical element and a base that has the same chemical element that are in the nutrients, the nutrient regime, we're actually not shifting out of range any of the nutrients that are good for this plant. They can survive a range of nutrients. So any other pH or nutrient questions at this point?
Nope, not now.
Okay, so some of the problems that we see are nutrient deficiencies. So on this plant right here, early on, the pH was not good. And so we get these light spots here. That's almost always an iron deficiency. And iron deficiencies often come when the pH is too high and too low for these too acidic. And that's what happened. We had to shift the pH up, but it went a little more than 2 days. It was 3 or 4 days, and the plant was very young. Another problem we see over here, these specks. I don't know if you can see them or not, Jeremiah. But you'll have this spotting on the leaves. These specks could be a nutrient deficiency, but in this case, it's actually being caused by mites, little 2-spotted mites. Well, how do I know that? One trick is to feel the leaf, slide your fingers very carefully, and then rub them together. And if you're feeling kind of a sandy feel to that, you're actually crushing the little mite bodies, okay? So we had mites on this, we've treated them. And what I would tell students here is the 3 Ds: dead, diseased, or damaged leaves are what need to be removed. So pruning is pretty simple for a plant like this. I'll just come in and I'm looking for the base of the petiole, looking for the base of that plant. I always want to bring leaves off as close to the base as I can, and I want to snap them off just like that. There's a little bit of tissue left over, but if I go through here and find all these dead leaves, pinch them off, you can use scissors, but there's really no need to. Removing this dead tissue or dying tissue removes a burden from the plant. And this is a great lesson for students. Plants are very resilient, and they actually respond to pruning in ways that are counterintuitive. They flourish back from after they've been cut down. A quick little side note: many religions around the world have myths based on plants, because many of those religions that we practice today in the world came around when agriculture began. The classic one is not to get religious, but the story of Jesus, where he's basically killed and comes back to life. It's thought by anthropologists is a way to tell the tale of plants, and that is you could cut a plant back and it can still flourish. So this is something I like to focus with students, is that when you see a problem, fix a problem. And one of the easiest ways to fix a problem is remove it when it comes to a plant. Now, there's another rule here, and it's the 1/3 rule. Generally, when you're pruning a plant, you don't want to take any more than 1/3 of the total mass of the plant, certainly of the leaf surface. And there are some exceptions when it comes to these types of plants. If we're farming, say, cilantro and things like that, we may pick them back a little harder, and they'll still come back quite nicely. But as a general rule, we call it the 1/3 rule.
So we have about a minute and a half before we're going to get into building the buckets. But I want to go back to a question we had in the first session. The cage you have around, can you answer that?
Sure. So this tomato cage is something that you construct, comes with a tower garden setup. You can see you have rods at 2 points on either side. And then that rod is covered with a plastic dowel here, here, and here. In the assembly, the rod is attached first, and you build from here to the first ring. You slide these on, and then you put the plastic inserts and all of the other ones. So this is here so you can see the tendrils are wrapping around. This is a great example of why you put the cage on. These tendrils wrap right around and then provide support to tomatoes, and in this case, cucumbers.
And when we're in our life science and we're talking about plant parts or early elementary tendrils, the question revolved around, is it something that y'all built? And I think that Ray pointed out, you can see if you do get a grow tower, in the base, they have the pre-built holes for the cage. So
we did buy them with tower gardens. We bought all the tower garden assemblies, but there's absolutely no reason you can't build your own cage out of something different. My suggestion is one of the easiest ways to do this is to find the wire that goes inside of concrete reinforcing. It's a little rusty, but what you can do is you can either paint over those surfaces or oil them, in some cases with mineral oil, so that they won't rust. And the plants will grow like a tomato cage. You can wrap those right around there and rest them up on top of the base.
We do have another question before we head out, but how do you deal with the roots growing into the bottom basin? Or do you have a problem with that?
Well, so I was actually talking to Jeremiah about this. We've found that the best way to use the towers has been to plant a crop, grow a crop, and harvest a crop. The students did this as kind of a demonstration and a gee whiz project. But one of the problems is what you talked about, the roots growing into the bottom. Keep an eye on them. As long as they don't grow into the pump, you're okay. If the pump gets blocked, you've got problems. So you can monitor that. It's not a problem for the roots to be there. And we've had towers that look like almost solid roots. We just keep putting water into them. But what we found is that it's more problematic in terms of cleanup and turnover. So we like to grow a single crop, harvest it in 22 to 28 days, clean everything out, and then just start a new crop.
And I would reinforce that cleaning process is important. You between cycles, you do need to have go through and do a cleaning of your system.
When you get into the farmers, the guys that use this, they say you can go 3 crop cycles. I'm with Katie. It's like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, especially for education, right? You only have 1 semester or 1 year. You've got to get it right. It's not like a production system where if it goes wrong, you can just substitute more production. This is where the kids are upset and crying at 3rd grade because their plants died. So Katie's absolutely right. Make sure you clean them up. And it's the best lesson for the students to get involved in that. Tower gardens, the small ones that are only 5 cans high, can be cleaned in the classroom. I've done it before. We've done it here right on campus where you can fill up the tubs and get, creative with baling, and you do it as long as you have a classroom sink. So it's doable.
All right, that's all the questions we have for now. And if you think of anything else, please feel free to put that in the chat. Ray, we can't thank you enough for all the things that you've been able to show us and teach us over our last 2 hours together.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity.
So I think Jeremiah is going to transition now. He is going to get us set up so you can see his bucket being put together. We just have just about 10 more minutes left together, but I know that many of you have already gotten a chance to really explore your buckets. So we'll let him get set up. And Jeremiah, just give me the okay when you're ready. Any other thoughts or questions that are circulating around for you, please don't hesitate to ask those. All right, you are spotlighted, Jeremiah, and ready to go.
So I want everybody to grab a kit. We're going to quickly run through what we have in the kit, and then we're going to look at building out a portion, or at least reverse engineering a kit that I built. So I'm going to switch over to my overhead cam. So if you're not familiar, the first thing that you received in your kit is a hole saw. And this should go into, I believe, a 1/4 inch drill and bigger. All you do is, if you have a drill, if you have a drill with you, give me a thumbs up so I can see. We'll do some drilling. All right, I think we're gonna have to drill some holes. So you just spin the top, you insert that into your chuck, and then you're gonna spin it back, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. And that's how you put in your hole saw. And you just spin it till it's tight. You'll hear mine click, and I'm ready to go. So the second thing that you should see, and you do have a couple extra bits, you see a submersible pump. This gets put in your bucket and you submerge it. So you fill the bucket with water, it's not gonna hurt it. It's made to submerge in liquids. You received a spray nozzle, and this will go to your submersible pump. So at the top, you'll see this brass fitting. This is gonna spray. If I wanna change the spray, I can loosen this top a little bit. If I wanna broadcast a little more, you gotta be careful. If you go too much, pressure is gonna pop it out. If it pops out, no worries. It's threaded, it screws right back in. You didn't break it. So everything that your students or you received, you shouldn't worry about students damaging. So to connect the pump and to create my spray nozzle, all I do is insert into my pump and I just tighten it down. So any questions about that part? Give me a thumbs up if everybody's following and you want me to move on. Excellent. So you can see I have my submersible pump. I have my spray nozzle. The next thing that you receive is the K-wool. Now, one of the things that is suggested with the grow tower, and through my experience with the grow tower, is that you want to prep these by soaking them for a few days before you plant. I found that I can plant straight in them. If you get the grow tower kit and you are chosen from it's the spray nozzle, the shrub sprinkler, it is. And you should have had some extra nozzles come in your submersible pump. So you'd put your seeds in your K-wool, you'd want to soak this in water for a few days. They ask or they suggest that you set these aside, keep them wet over the germination period to allow them to start to germinate, and then you would tear these off and plant them into your baskets that you received. And these are your baskets. These will fit in your grow tower. Somebody did identify that this looks right about the same size as a 2-inch hole saw. And that was a great observation because it is the perfect size for a 2-inch hole saw. Even a 3-inch, we sent you a 2-inch. So as you're drilling your buckets, that hole saw is perfect. You would just, once you have germination, you would just press these into your pod. They did send you a rubber disc that you can use to help keep the sprinkle off. You'll see that it does have a hole, and you would put your plant stems through that. I found I don't need these if I put my cable in here good enough, but you can put these right over. And if you grow some plants in a growing medium like perlite, you do not need this rock wool. You can just put the plants in here. The roots will grow through the basket, and you can use the stopper. We have actually started, we've done some tomatoes in our grow tower, and we've started clipping and pruning, and we've started sticking the pruning right into the tower without baskets, and they're taking root because they have the light, the nutrients, and the water. So to create your grow tower, the first thing you're going to want to do is you want to mark off your lid. So I have created a star pattern. I wanted to give some space. And if you got your lid, this is the time to grab your lid and your drill. And we will drill one of these. So for younger kids, we do maple in the classroom, which our students love. And a lot of times they have never touched a drill or a power tool. In 5th grade, they had never touched a power tool. This is one of the more safe tools to use. We haven't had any issues. At the younger grades, we want to make sure that they have some supervision. But all you will do, and I'm going to move my camera a little bit. So for those who are drilling with us, all you want to do is put the bit right down on the box, and you're just going to pull the trigger real slow. The drill will do the work. Hold your bucket. You can see you've got your perfect hole. So sometimes you'll get the plastic stuck in here, and you just need to rotate it out. Once you have done that, all you need to do is to plop in your basket. And then at that point, you can put your K-wool. Once you have germination, you can go right into the basket. Now they do, sometimes you want to put a substrate over your seeds while they're germinating to keep them from drying out. You can just pinch some of the K-wool over it. It should work the same. You want to keep it as simple as possible and as inexpensive as possible. So your last step is you want to put your pump after you drilled your hose. It has some suction cups. And you want to put your pump right into the bucket. I drilled one on the side. And then I took one of these rubber stoppers and I cut a slit and I right around the side so that it would secure itself. And then I use that as a plug. So instead of wasting grow space for the plug out of the top, I now have the plug on the side. So that was my engineering fun a couple days ago. I thought about how can I put this in a better place. Last thing that you have received is a nutritional blend. You did also receive your base and acid, which should have a pH test. And so that you can use this. The directions are on the back. It's a 216. But with your acid and base, if you need to change your pH, it should not affect this. It's not a 2-part, it's a 1-part, but this should be good to go. It's hydroponic solution. So anybody have any questions? I know we went pretty quickly there. Well, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out at any time. We encourage the engineering. You did go through all 8 steps, or you went through 4 of the engineering standards, next generation standards, as you participated as teachers today. And when your students participate in this lesson, they will go through all 8 of your NGSS engineering standards, as well as many of your core content standards. So thank you for joining us today. I know Katie is going to give some feedback and some next steps.
So we are so glad that you were all with us today. We have just a few notes for you. So Caitlin did have a question about how much water we use. You always want to make sure, no matter what, that your pump is submerged. You don't want the water to get below that pump. So keep that in mind. Too much would be if it's spilling over the top. You want a little bit of headspace in there, but another great thing for your students to explore and try to better understand. Just a few notes. We are just so happy to have you all with us. You had excellent questions. We love spending time with you. Thank you for your engagement. As we wrap up, you're going to receive an email from Jeremiah with an evaluation, and here's something really exciting. If you complete that evaluation and you put your name on it, we will include you in a drawing to win. We have 3 grow lights that we're giving away that you can use in a variety of ways to start your seeds or just to grow something in your classroom. So we have those 3 giveaways. Also, completing your evaluation is how you're going to get your CTLE. So if we're going through this 2 hours with us, you're going to receive 2 hours of CTLE, but you do have to complete that information on the second page of your evaluation. And with that, that's our exciting news. We're excited to give those grow lights away to you. Again, don't forget to apply for our Grow Tower grant. And we are excited to get you growing in your classroom. Get excited for next year, and hopefully it's a refreshed view. As teachers and farmers, we have to be optimistic about what's next, right? So we're looking forward to 21-22. Any final questions that we can answer, we're happy to. Otherwise, Jeremiah and I will stay on for a few more minutes if you have additional questions. But we hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks for hanging with us. Sorry, Kristen, so the evaluation is going to come in the email. So you'll get tomorrow or the next day, Jeremiah will send out that eval.
Katie, would you be a good person to talk to about additional resources for optimal use of a greenhouse as a teaching space?
Send me a note. So
Sure.
what we can do, so along with us as connecting teachers who want to use food and agriculture, we're also connected to our state agriculture teachers who all have greenhouses, greenhouse curriculum, greenhouse management skills. Do you already have a greenhouse or you want a greenhouse?
Oh, it's built.
And now you need to know how to use it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm right down the road from Ray and I talk with him often and a lot, but
Are you in Brazier?
I sure am.
I grew up in Fort Covington. I'm a Salmon River graduate.
Yeah, we had that conversation when I was there for the Tower Garden training before.
That's right. Oh, yes, perfect. So we are happy to connect you with ag teachers of the region. And they're going to be so happy to help you get that up and running and started.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Yes. Let me know.
To you directly, for sure. Yep. But I definitely do have Ray on my radar already. I was actually at his greenhouses over the weekend.
He's the best.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thanks for being with us. Making sure we got everything in here. Awesome. Great job, everyone. Thank you. And so I'm going to close out and get this downloading, and we'll see you in about an hour or so. I can't hear you, Jeremy.